This video is brought to you by Loot Crate. Follow the link in the description and use the promo code also in the description to get $3 off your first crate.
Hey, what's up people? Piz out here, and I'm going to talk to you guys about the newest Scream Factory Blu-ray release. This one for Michael Mann's Manhunter. I'd had several people request that I do a review of Manhunter, knowing what a huge fan I am of Michael Mann. But I decided to hold off because I knew this release was coming out very soon. So this is going to be partly a movie review, but more so a review of this Blu-ray release because there's a lot to sink your teeth into on this release. Or in the case of Manhunter, a lot to sink your false teeth into. But yeah, I'm a huge fan of Michael Mann. If you guys have been around my channel for any period of time, you know I love Michael Mann. Movies like Heat, movies like Thief, movies like The Insider, Last of the Mohicans, Manhunter. I'm a huge fan of Michael Mann. And Manhunter is one of those movies that's very much a Michael Mann crime thriller. If you're a fan of Heat, if you're a fan of Thief, if you're a fan of that kind of filmmaking that is very highly stylized, yet very much detail-oriented. You just get the sense with all of Michael Mann's movies, and Manhunter included, that he did so much research. And I think that's why Michael Mann only does a movie every few years, because if he dives into a movie, if he decides to dedicate himself to a film, it's all or nothing. It's total dedication to whatever the topic of the film is. Manhunter's no exception. It feels like Michael Mann probably spent countless hours with characters like Will Graham, played here in the film by William Peterson. Maybe even some time hanging out in prison with characters like Francis Dollarhide here, the Tooth Fairy, the antagonist of Manhunter, and of course Hannibal Lecter there, played by Brian Cox in the film. I love this movie. I love this movie. Manhunter, really the only sort of barb that I hear anybody sort of, casting at Manhunter is that it looks and feels kind of dated. It's very, very 80s. This movie is very, very 1980s. The look of the film, the styles of the film, as far as hairstyles, as far as the clothing people are wearing, the music, it's very, very much a film of the 1980s. And that doesn't bother me a bit. Does some of it look dated? Sure. But to me, I'm perfectly okay with that. I'm far more interested in the film, in the characters in the film, in the mood of the film, in the atmosphere of the film, in the style of the film. And all those elements are just so well done in Manhunter. The cast is phenomenal. I was talking about William Peterson in another video recently. I don't even remember what video that was, but I was talking about how much I liked him as an actor. He's so good as Will Graham here in Manhunter. He is like he's a damaged character, but he's so good at what he does. And what he does is get into the mind of serial killers. You get into the mind of psychotic, sociopathic killers. He's so good at that, even though he's damaged. Even though, that ability to get into these people's minds is difficult to turn on and off, he's so good at it. He's such a pro at it, you know what I mean? Francis Dollarhide, played by Tom Noonan. As a character, he's absolutely fascinating. And I love the book Red Dragon. I think I like the book Red Dragon more than I like Silence of the Lambs. When you say Hannibal Lecter, when you say Thomas Harris, everybody thinks of Silence of the Lambs. Everybody thinks of Anthony Hopkins. And very much, and not to get into a comparison of Silence of the Lambs and Manhunter or Red Dragon, etc., but to me, Red Dragon, the story of Red Dragon, which they changed the name to Manhunter here because, according to Dilo De Laurentiis, he didn't like the title because he didn't want people to think that this was a kung fu movie. Also, he recently released Year of the Dragon, the Mickey Rourke movie that did not do very well, and he didn't want anybody to think that this was like a a sequel or any kind, you know, in the Dragon series from him. So they changed the name to Manhunter. But Red Dragon, the story of Red Dragon, I just find far more interesting and far more compelling than Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs is the Hannibal Lecter story. He owns the book, he owns the film, and of course that's because Anthony Hopkins plays him so well in that film. In this movie, and in the book Red Dragon, Francis Dolarhyde, I think, steals the show. He has such a great character arc. He's such a evil character in the beginning, a totally psychotic character. He thinks that if he kills these families, he will turn into the Red Dragon from the William Blake painting. Along the way, he meets this blind woman, played by Joan Allen in the movie. Great performance from her. And she doesn't judge him on his appearance, as everybody else has through the course of his life. He has a hair lip. He's very tall. He's sort of gangly. So he's very much lived a guarded, kind of shunned, ostracized kind of existence that's pushed him over this edge into complete madness. At one point in the movie, it's of course far more detailed in the book, of course, he sort of realizes that through this woman, maybe I can be loved. Maybe I can be a normal person. Maybe I don't need to turn into this Red Dragon and do whatever he plans to do after he changes into the Red Dragon. To the point in the book, he like breaks into this museum and he's eating the painting, as if eating the Red Dragon painting would make it stop, which I thought was a great scene. I mean, of course, they couldn't do that for the film, but just a great scene in the book. But he has that same arc in this film, and he thinks, you know, he gets to that point, but then, of course, madness kind of knocks at the door like, no, you're insane. And, you know, so things kind of fall apart for him. But I love the character, and I love his arc, and I love that he almost kind of, you know, saw a little bit of redemption, and then, you know, like I said, you know, the madness just swept back over him. Brian Cox's Hannibal Lecter, he's not in the movie very much, so it's really not fair to compare his performance to Anthony Hopkins, because again, in Silence of the Lambs, in Hannibal, in the Red Dragon film that had him in it, those movies are very much about him. Those movies are very much about Hannibal Lecter. Those are Hannibal Lecter movies. He owns those movies. Of course, Anthony Hopkins is great in them. Brian Cox, his version of Hannibal Lecter is very much in the background. But I love the way that he portrays Hannibal Lecter. He portrays him, I think, kind of like a cobra. He just seems very laid back and very kind of loosey-goosey. But you know the moment you're not paying full attention to him is the moment he's going to strike. And Will Graham, their moments together in the film, Will Graham is so focused on him. And everything that he's saying and doing in his cell, they've got him in this very white, almost looks like a bathroom kind of cell in the movie. But their exchanges, he's just so locked on him and just so focused, as if, you know, if I avert my eyes for a moment, he'll strike. But yeah, I've always really liked Brian Cox's performance as Hannibal Lecter, the first Hannibal Lecter, even though he's very much overshadowed by Anthony Hopkins in the other films that featured Hannibal Lecter. Still does a very good job. Another thing people knock about this movie, even some cast members that I discovered through the Blu-ray about Manhunter, is the score, is the music in the film. I like the music. It's very much that Tangerine Dream, very synth, very moody, very atmospheric kind of music. Again, very 80s, very 80s, but I like it. It works in the context of Manhunter. I don't think it's quite as good as the Tangerine Dream score from like from Thief, or even the Tangerine Dream score from The Keep. I think those are a little bit better than what we got with Manhunter, but still, I really like the Manhunter music. The look of the movie is phenomenal. The director of photography, Dante Spinotti. The color palette is everywhere. You have such rich, beautiful colors in this film. The way the shots are framed with those color palettes, it's like every shot of the movie is like a beautiful painting. It's almost like Michael Mann was, you know, trying to be the Dario Argento of the crime thriller kind of genre. Just beautifully shot, beautifully photographed. The ending of the movie, the big climactic part of the film, in Francis Dollarhide's house, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida's blasting on the radio. William Peterson's character bursts through a window and attacks Francis Dollarhide. Great stuff. Great stuff. I love Manhunter. I love this movie. Like I said, it's such a beautiful looking movie. Stylistically, it's great. Yeah, it's very, very 80s. But I don't have a problem with that. I have no problem with that. I love Manhunter. I recommend it. If you've not seen it, go watch it. And this Blu-ray would definitely be the way to go if you're going to buy Manhunter. I took notes for you guys because that's what I do. There's a lot to discuss here. We've got 2 discs. Disc 1 is the theatrical R-rated version of the film, which this set also includes the director's cut of the movie, which is 4 minutes longer. But Disc 1 has a theatrical version. We kick off the Disc 1 with an interview with William Peterson called The Mind of Madness. It's 18 minutes long. He discusses how Michael Mann had initially approached him back in the 80s about doing a film called Heat. Before Manhunter, which at the time, of course, was called Red Dragon, based after the Thomas Harris novel. He discusses working with Michael Mann's attention to detail, how Michael Mann composed, you know, his shots, how he uses the camera, almost as if the camera, he kind of directs the camera almost as if it's another character in the movie, or another actor in the film. He discusses working with Tom Noonan and how Noonan didn't want William Peterson around. When Tom Noonan was on set, he didn't want William Peterson around. Anyway, he didn't want any of the cast other than Joan Allen around because he wanted, you know, he was very much in character as Dollarhide, and he didn't want to get to know Tom Noonan. He didn't want to become friendly with Tom Noonan. Tom Noonan was his, William Peterson was very much Tom Noonan's nemesis in the film. He didn't want to be friendly with him. He didn't want to, you know, like him. Didn't want to have anything to do with him. Wanted to keep it very much method, which I thought was cool. But then after they wrapped the movie, actually Tom Noonan and William Peterson went out and had pancakes together, which I thought was interesting. Very nice little conversation with William Peterson there. Next up, we've got Courting a Killer, an interview with Joan Allen. It's about 16 minutes long. She discusses working with Michael Mann, his energy on the set, his attention to detail, his attention to specifics, including the actors' ties in the movie. He was very, very detail-oriented about what kind of ties the actors in the film were wearing. She discusses how she prepared for her role. She plays a blind character in the film, so she actually went to a school for the blind, and one of the instructors there actually took her out on the street blindfolded and kind of showed her how, you know, a blind person has, because they don't have sight, they have to be totally aware of everything else in their environment to get around. She discusses working with the other actors in the film, particularly Tom Noonan, and how dedicated he was to his character. 16 minutes long, very nice interview with Joan Allen. Next up, we've got a 22-minute long interview with Tom Noonan called Francis is Gone Forever. He discusses how Michael Mann was very hands-off with him and trusted him on set, and, you know, called him Dollarhide on the set, didn't really direct him very much, just kind of let him go and let him be Dollarhide. He discusses how he approached the character and found him to be a very sad character, and how he used to write over and over again during filming. He kept a character journal while filming Manhunter in the character of Dollarhide, and he used to write in the journal over and over and over again, "I'm dead, they're all dead, nothing matters." He's an intense guy. Tom Noonan is an intense guy. He had the production put out a memo saying that no one was supposed to talk to him on the set. No one was supposed to refer to him by his name. They were to refer to him by Dollarhide only. Again, very, very intense guy. Very method. He actually discusses going on Regis and Kathy Lee to promote the movie. And when they announced him, they announced him as the serial killer Tom Noonan. Like, next on our show is the serial killer Tom Noonan. Which, why would you do that? So, like, he came out and, like, he just was, like, weird for weirdness' sake. And just freaked out Kathy Lee. And halfway through the interview, they cut for a commercial and they just asked him to leave. They didn't want to continue with the interview. So, yeah, a really interesting interview with Tom Noonan there. Like I said, very intense guy. Next up, we have The Eye of the Storm, an interview with Director of Photography Dante Spinotti. It's about 35.5 minutes, very detailed, very technical. Him talking about working with Michael Mann, him talking about shooting the film, the color palette, the camera positioning. Again, very, very technical, but very, very detailed conversation with Dante Spinotti. Very interesting stuff. Next up, we have got an interview with Brian Cox called The First Lecter. It's about 40 minutes long. Very detailed conversation with Brian Cox. He discusses how he auditioned for Manhunter, how he met with Michael Mann, and got cast to play Hannibal Lecter. He discusses how he modeled his performance after a real-life killer in Scotland that he was obsessed with as a child. Thought that was interesting. He also discusses how Thomas Harris initially sent him the book for Silence of the Lambs, like saying, like, here's what you'll be doing soon in the movie of Silence of the Lambs, which I thought that was pretty interesting as well. He discusses how Jonathan Demme, who directed Silence of the Lambs, wanted to kind of go his own route and create a more gothic film, and of course cast Anthony Hopkins instead. Also, Brian Cox is clearly not a fan of the Manhunter score. He mentions a couple of times in this interview that he's just not a fan of the music in the movie. But again, 40 minutes, very, very detailed. He talks a lot about the film. A lot about a lot about being an actor just in general, which was really cool. Last on the first disc, we have got Music of Manhunter, an interview with composer Mikhail Rubini and musicians Barry Andrews, Gary Putnam, Rick Schaefer, and Gene Stashuk. It's 42 minutes long. They each discuss how they contributed musically to the film, what their how Michael Mann, like one of them actually said, Rubini actually discussed how Michael Mann drew inspiration for the movie's musical cues and what kinds of music he wanted in a scene based on the color of that scene. So if it was like he said, Michael Mann said, okay, this scene is green, make me green music, or like this scene's purple, make me purple music. Like he was, like the color meant a mood, so therefore make me music for that mood. I thought that was really interesting. But again, 42 minutes, very, very detailed. Lots of musicians worked on this film, and just really interesting conversations with them and their interactions with Michael Mann, and sort of what musically where he was coming from as far as what he wanted in the film, and really interesting stuff. We have a theatrical trailer on disc 1 and a still gallery as well. Disc 2 is the director's cut of the movie. As I said, the director's cut's like 4 minutes longer than the theatrical version. The director's cut, however, is presented only in standard diff on disc 2. We have a couple of vintage interviews on disc 2 from the year 2000, which I believe was on maybe an Anchor Bay release for Manhunter. We've got Inside Manhunter, a vintage making of with interviews with William Peterson, Tom Noonan, Brian Cox, and Joan Allen. Just over 17 minutes long. They each discuss getting cast in the film, the research they did for their characters, working with Michael Mann, shooting the film, the intensity on the set, etc., etc. We have the Manhunter Look, a conversation with Dante Spinotti, which is about 10 minutes. Again, talking a lot about the color palette he used in the film, the placement of the camera, etc., etc. We also have a commentary with Michael Mann for the director's cut of the film. I watched about the first 40 minutes of the film with this commentary. Very detail oriented, very technical, a lot of background on, you know, how Michael Mann researched, you know, writing the script for the film, the kind of research he wanted the actors to do in preparation for their roles in the film. Really nice conversation with Michael Mann. Again, I was talking about this with the Night of the Living Dead Blu-ray. When you just have one person doing a commentary, typically the director, you have a lot of moments of silence. There weren't a lot of moments of silence in the first 40 minutes of Manhunter that I recall. It was mostly Michael Mann talking, giving lots of detail, lots of technical filmmaking kind of information, as well as background information. So pretty interesting commentary up to that point with Michael Mann. Definitely will watch the rest of the film with that Michael Mann commentary. But if you are a fan of Manhunter, this is definitely the way to go. The picture quality and the sound quality are both good. This isn't like a 4K scan of the original camera negative or anything like that. It's presented in 1080p high definition. It still looked pretty darn good, I thought. The director's cut in standard def was a little sketchy here and there, but still I thought looked okay. The sound quality was really good, I thought, on both. But if you're a fan of Manhunter, this is definitely the way to go. You get both versions of the film. Lots and lots of extras on here for you to sink your teeth into. As with all Scream Factory Collector's Editions, you get an awesome slipcase with some newly commissioned artwork, which I think looks amazing. You can flip this sleeve inside out for the original poster art, which I always do. And yeah, again, if you are a fan of Manhunter, this is the way to go. Scream Factory Blu-ray is definitely worth picking up. If you've pre-ordered the Manhunter Scream Factory Collector's Edition Blu-ray, please let me know in the comments section below. If you're a fan of Manhunter, please let me know in the comments section below. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You guys are awesome. Take care. And until next time, peace.